What happens when ADHD looks quieter? The missing half of the story. The inattentive profile reveals itself through a specific set of symptoms that often go unrecognized. According to diagnostic criteria, these include difficulty sustaining attention in tasks, making careless mistakes, failing to follow through on instructions, problems with organization, avoiding tasks that require sustained mental effort, losing things necessary for activities, being easily distracted by extraneous stimuli, and forgetfulness in daily activities. What's crucial to understand is that the DSM allows for diagnosis based solely on these inattentive symptoms. Hyperactivity is not required. You can meet full diagnostic criteria without ever displaying excessive movement or impulsivity. Clinical evidence shows that ADHD manifests quite similarly across sexes in diagnosed samples, with only small differences in how people endorse specific symptoms. However, referral patterns and social factors create the appearance of much larger differences in who gets identified. The gap isn't necessarily about biology, it's about visibility and recognition. For many women, these inattentive symptoms form the core of their daily struggles. They might reread the same page in a book multiple times without retaining information, spend hours searching for misplaced keys, or walk into rooms only to forget their purpose. One woman described her experience. "I always thought I was just scattered and needed to try harder. Finally understanding it was ADHD, I felt like someone had given me permission to stop hating myself." These aren't occasional lapses, but constant patterns of disorganization and cognitive fatigue that interfere with functioning across work, school, and relationships. Because these traits don't disrupt classrooms or create workplace conflicts, they rarely draw the outside concern that hyperactive behaviors do. Teachers see a student staring out the window and assume she's dreamy, but not in need of evaluation. Managers notice missed deadlines and attribute them to poor time management rather than a clinical condition. Friends and family may grow frustrated with repeated absent-mindedness without recognizing it as part of a neurological pattern. This invisibility is defining. Unless someone knows what to look for, inattentive symptoms blend into everyday personality quirks. The psychological consequences run deep. When symptoms remain unnoticed by others, individuals rely on self-reflection to detect their struggles. That insight is difficult, especially in childhood, when someone lacks language to articulate why focusing feels exhausting or routine tasks seem overwhelming. Without external validation, many girls conclude they're lazy, scattered, or not trying hard enough. Once internalized, these labels shape identity well into adulthood. This explains delayed help-seeking behaviors. If difficulties have been framed in moral terms for years, bringing them to a doctor may not occur to someone. Instead, women try harder, buy more planners, invest in organizational apps, or blame themselves for falling short. Each failure feels like proof of character weakness, not neurochemical differences. Meanwhile, untreated ADHD quietly undermines academics, career development, relationships, and self-confidence. Even when others notice symptoms, the language used often distorts reality. A girl who forgets homework gets labeled disorganized. A teenager who zones out during lectures is called spacey. A woman struggling with meeting details might be branded unfocused or unmotivated. These seemingly harmless labels carry long-term impact, reinforcing the belief that she's simply inattentive by choice rather than directing her toward professional evaluation. Inattentive ADHD symptoms rarely attract the urgency that hyperactive ones do. A child constantly disrupting class forces intervention because the behavior affects everyone. A quiet student struggling silently doesn't compel teachers to call home or push for support. The lack of disruption works against her, creating an illusion of coping when internally the struggle is immense. Adults may praise compliant behavior without recognizing the mental cost required to maintain it. When women discover later in life that inattentive symptoms alone qualify for diagnosis, the revelation carries mixed emotions. Relief that scattered attention and chronic fatigue weren't moral failings, but anger that years were wasted because no one recognized the signs. Some realize that anxiety or depression treatments only touch the surface, leaving deeper executive functioning challenges unaddressed. Others recognize that patterns defining their school years, work habits, and relationships weren't personality quirks, but symptoms of a documented condition. To see inattentive ADHD clearly requires shifting perspective from external disruption to internal experience. The disarray happens beneath the surface: constant effort to organize daily life, hours lost to procrastination, exhaustion from managing routines others take for granted. It's an invisible load carrying real psychological weight. Recognizing these signs as more than quirks allows women to finally seek accurate evaluation. But recognition alone isn't enough. The very social forces that make these symptoms invisible also shape how they develop and manifest. From the earliest ages, certain expectations about behavior create filters that determine which struggles get noticed and which remain hidden. Gender expectations as a funnel. Girls learn early that compliance brings rewards while disruption brings consequences. Schools praise them for being quiet, following directions, and keeping emotions under control. Parents often describe a well-behaved daughter as one who is polite, helpful, and easygoing. Research shows that girls are more often socialized to be compliant, and teachers are less likely to refer girls for ADHD assessments, even when symptoms are present. This cultural training creates a powerful filter that determines which struggles get noticed and which remain hidden. The expectation to be well-behaved doesn't erase ADHD symptoms. It pushes them inward. A boy who has trouble sitting still might be sent to the school counselor for evaluation, while a girl with the same wiring learns to suppress the urge to fidget. Instead of shouting out in frustration, she stays quiet and swallows her distress. The external signs of difficulty that teachers and doctors are trained to notice get minimized, while the internal struggle escalates unnoticed. This pattern explains why so many women describe their ADHD as invisible during childhood. A teacher might report that a student is pleasant and obedient, overlooking the fact that she consistently zones out, misses instructions, or hands in incomplete assignments. Parents might believe their daughter is simply dreamy, when in reality she is expending enormous mental energy just to stay on track. The behaviors praised as feminine virtues, being quiet, patient, or agreeable, hide the neurological challenges that would otherwise lead to concern and evaluation. Over time, these rewarded behaviors develop into psychological masking. A girl who struggles to pay attention may compensate by over-preparing for school assignments, staying up long into the night to finish work that took her peers half the time. Because no one sees her mental exhaustion, adults assume she has no difficulties at all. What develops is a cycle. She feels compelled to appear perfect to match social expectations. She drains herself to meet that demand, and her underlying ADHD symptoms are left unaddressed. The adults around her reinforce this pattern without realizing it. Teachers see the surface-level compliance and reward her for being such a good student. Parents are relieved she is not causing disruptions. Every time she gets praised for staying quiet or for not being a problem, the message is embedded more deeply. Do not let the struggle show. Nobody asks if reading takes her 3 times longer, or if she forgets multi-step instructions minutes after hearing them, because she keeps the difficulties private. The downstream effect is mislabeling. Once a young girl consistently masks her ADHD traits, the symptoms that break through the surface are often emotional rather than behavioral. Instead of racing around a room, she may appear tense, worried, or withdrawn. From the perspective of parents or teachers, these behaviors do not match the ADHD stereotype, so they are often interpreted as signs of anxiety or sadness instead. The original neurological challenge gets hidden behind secondary emotional expressions, leading interventions in the wrong direction. This funneling effect becomes increasingly powerful with age. By adolescence, expectations of how girls should appear intensify. They are encouraged to be organized, mature, and emotionally stable. For a teenager with inattentive ADHD, falling short of these expectations creates mounting pressure. She may start to believe other people's labels, seeing herself as careless or lazy for missing details, or shameful for being unable to stay on top of her responsibilities. Missing the chance for early recognition carries consequences that echo into adulthood. The brain adapts to the coping mechanisms established in childhood. A woman who learned to suppress difficulties by staying quiet and controlled continues that pattern in college or in the workplace. She appears organized by overworking, appears attentive by rehearsing conversations in advance, and hides forgetfulness with elaborate reminders. Outwardly, she fulfills gender expectations of competence and composure. Internally, she is juggling an overwhelming mental load just to keep pace. The psychological cost is not just burnout, but an altered sense of self. Growing up rewarded for compliance rather than recognized for struggle, many women internalize the belief that they only have value when they suppress their difficulties. This belief pushes them to silence needs and mask failures. The The ability to succeed becomes measured against society's insistence that femininity equals emotional control. When the eventual collapse comes, whether through burnout, breakdown, or recognition of unmet needs, they finally learn that ADHD played a role all along, but the years spent misdirected toward other explanations are gone. Recognizing how these dynamics form brings an important insight. Invisibility is not inherent to women's ADHD, but socially constructed. The traits themselves are present from childhood, yet cultural standards of acceptable behavior reframe them, disguise them, and funnel them into categories that obscure the original source. Teachers and parents notice the quiet compliance, but miss the ongoing cognitive battle. Clinicians hear descriptions of worry or sadness without realizing they may be downstream from an inattentive profile. This bias operates quietly through the well-meaning praise given to the polite student, or the comfort parents take in having a child who doesn't cause trouble. But beneath those reassurances lies a mental strain that continues without support. The trajectory is predictable. Unnoticed symptoms lead to mismatched labels. Mismatched labels guide partial treatments. And by the time ADHD is recognized, years of unnecessary stress have piled up. The funnel effect of gender expectations doesn't just guide behavior. It actively channels where attention is focused and where it is not. That, in turn, determines who gets timely support and who is left to explain away their symptoms as something else. Understanding that early socialization is itself a filter helps explain why so many women were never recognized as children, and why the system continues to miss them today. But the strategies these women develop to navigate these expectations create their own complex psychological patterns. Why masking works until it doesn't. These compensatory behaviors develop into what researchers call masking. One of the most common but least understood ways ADHD shows up in women. Clinical studies and qualitative interviews report that women develop compensatory strategies and inflexible systems like excessive list-making and overpreparation, which clinicians recognize as common masking behaviors. At first glance, it looks like a clever survival strategy. When symptoms threaten to reveal themselves, forgetting an assignment, zoning out in a meeting, or struggling to follow instructions, masking steps in as a cover. A woman might overprepare for an event to compensate for memory lapses, or write pages of reminders so she doesn't miss a single task. She might nod along in a conversation, even though her attention drifted halfway through. This ongoing performance produces what psychologists call a false sense of competence. Outwardly, the person fulfills expectations of being organized, focused, and reliable. Internally, they are running a marathon in their own minds, rehearsing every move just to keep up. Unlike a skill that becomes easier with practice, masking requires energy every single time. The longer someone uses these workarounds, the more draining they become. The social need to appear competent drives this behavior. Because many girls grow up being rewarded for politeness and self-control, it feels dangerous to allow symptoms to become visible. Forgetting things openly risks being labeled careless. Struggling with instructions risks being treated as unintelligent. To avoid these judgments, masking teaches women to stay one step ahead of exposure through rigid checking systems and obsessive planning. The pressure intensifies in professional settings. A woman with ADHD who is late to a meeting may fear her credibility will be questioned, so she starts arriving excessively early. At work, she might spend nights revising a project repeatedly to meet perfectionistic standards. She knows others would complete the same task in half the time, but masking requires the appearance of flawless output. The fear of judgment reinforces the behavior, even when the cost is sleep, free time, or mental health. This cycle feeds into perfectionism. Each time a woman compensates by working twice as hard, she raises the bar for herself. Friends or employers see only the end result, not the struggle behind it, and assume she has no difficulties at all. Soon, she is expected to always be organized, always be on time, always be in control. Expectations that even someone without ADHD might struggle with. The act of masking transforms into a permanent state of vigilance. Over time, self-criticism grows alongside perfectionism. If the mask slips, if an email is forgotten, if a task goes unfinished, the woman may experience intense shame. She interprets mistakes as proof she is failing, not as signs she is overextending herself. Because no one around her sees the hidden effort, she feels alone in the struggle. The woman tells herself she must work harder next time, reinforcing the cycle of overpreparation and self-blame. Masking does provide short-term benefits. It can help someone avoid embarrassing mistakes and reduce the immediate risk of being judged. It can even create opportunities, since seeming competent leads to more trust or responsibility. But these benefits are temporary and come at a steep cost. What once felt like small adjustments, writing more lists, rehearsing scripts before conversations, spending extra hours triple-checking work, eventually becomes unsustainable. Burnout is the inevitable result. The effort required to maintain appearances drains emotional and cognitive resources. Instead of relief, success brings dread. I got through this project, but can I keep it up next time? This exhaustion alters motivation, outlook, and self-identity. Some women realize their masking strategies are breaking down when life responsibilities multiply. Entering university, taking on a new career, or becoming a parent stretches their systems beyond what compensatory strategies can manage. Masking also interferes with timely diagnosis. When a clinician asks about functioning, a woman might present the carefully maintained mask rather than the underlying difficulties. She might describe elaborate strategies without explaining the energy behind them. From the outside, it sounds like she is coping just fine, without details about the toll, the fatigue, the self-criticism, the perfectionist spiral. A clinician may underestimate the impact of ADHD or misinterpret the symptoms entirely. If you've been overcompensating for years, that's not proof of strength. It may be a sign of masking. The same strategies that made life manageable at first can become the very thing that makes it overwhelming. What began as protection against judgment slowly transforms into a source of psychological harm, creating a cycle where the harder someone tries to appear normal, the more exhausted and overwhelmed they become. This exhaustion often gets mistaken for something else entirely, an anxiety label instead. When symptoms go unrecognized, doctors often reach for the most familiar explanation. It is not unusual for women who actually have ADHD to walk away from a doctor's office with an anxiety diagnosis instead. On the surface, this seems to make sense. When someone talks about feeling overwhelmed every day, losing track of what they are supposed to do, or lying awake at night worrying about unfinished tasks, it sounds very similar to generalized anxiety. The difficulty is that inattentive ADHD can create those exact same symptoms, but for very different reasons. Research shows that women with ADHD have higher rates of anxiety and depression as comorbid conditions, so co-occurrence is common. This is why clinicians must disentangle primary versus secondary conditions rather than assuming one rules out the other. What looks like constant worry may in fact be the brain trying to manage a flood of distractions, disorganization, and forgotten responsibilities. Because the presentation overlaps with anxiety, the true source can be missed. Inattentive ADHD often shows up in small, everyday frustrations that build over time. A woman may forget important deadlines, lose track of conversations, misplace important papers, or struggle to finish tasks despite spending hours at her desk. Each one of these lapses may cause her to worry. She lies awake, replaying the email she forgot to send, or the bill she failed to pay. The worry begins with ADHD-related executive difficulties, but by the time she explains it to a doctor, it sounds identical to anxiety. The brain's response to untreated ADHD can itself produce anxious states. Imagine repeatedly missing obligations, disappointing peers, or forgetting important steps no matter how much effort you put in. Over time, this experience builds anticipation of failure. Rather than trusting herself, a woman starts to expect mistakes. That constant vigilance fuels physiological worry. She is not only distracted and disorganized, she is now anxious about being distracted and disorganized. This secondary anxiety compounds the original ADHD, making it even harder to separate one condition from the other. The key diagnostic distinction lies in the triggers. When anxiety spikes are tightly linked to task disorganization, missed deadlines, or forgotten responsibilities, ADHD may be primary. A woman might feel calm when supported by structures or reminders, but intensely anxious the moment she remembers something important was forgotten. By contrast, anxiety that is diffuse and unrelated to organizational challenges suggests a primary anxiety disorder. This nuance can be missed unless someone is specifically evaluating both conditions side by side. The mislabeling cycle becomes self-reinforcing. Once anxiety is written in the chart, the woman may be given standard treatments like therapy, focused on worry management, or medication for anxiety. While these approaches can help reduce surface-level tension, they do not address the executive skill deficits caused by ADHD. The missed emails, late assignments, and lost belongings don't stop happening. Each setback reignites frustration, which in turn revives the very anxiety the treatment was supposed to calm. From the patient's perspective, this creates confusion. Some treatments may offer partial relief. Mindfulness may help with emotional regulation, but it won't fix poor time management. Anti-anxiety medication may blunt the panic before a deadline, but it won't prevent the deadline from being forgotten. Over time, the individual sees a gap between effort and outcome. She follows clinical advice, but still ends up caught in the same loops of missed tasks and self-criticism. Anxiety diagnoses also persist because they align with cultural expectations. Women who describe constant stress are readily understood as anxious, whereas describing attention lapses may be seen as normal forgetfulness or even brushed off as lack of discipline. It is socially safer to claim anxiety than to risk being labeled careless. This means even the way patients frame their own struggles can skew the diagnosis. To avoid mislabeling, there are 2 practical steps that can help when speaking to clinicians. First, bring specific daily examples that show the connection between organizational struggles and emotional distress. Instead of saying, "I feel anxious," try, "I panic when I realize I've forgotten another important deadline." Second, bring an informant, a family member, partner, or old teacher who can provide childhood history. This outside perspective often reveals patterns that were dismissed as personality quirks, but actually point to ADHD. The costs of mislabeling are significant. Weeks, months, or years of potential ADHD support may be lost to treatments addressing only the stress response. During that time, self-worth deteriorates. A woman may come to believe she is deficient in emotional control rather than recognizing she is battling a neurological disorder. With each cycle of incomplete treatment, her trust in clinical help erodes. For women, the revelation that ADHD was the root cause all along can be staggering. What they assumed was an uncontrollable worry disorder turns out to be secondary to an attention condition. This not only reshapes treatment, but reshapes self-understanding. Anxiety no longer feels like a mysterious failing of resilience. It begins to look like a rational response to years of unfinished tasks, strained schedules, and missed opportunities. The overlap between ADHD and anxiety is therefore less about one being mistaken for the other, and more about one disguising the other. Inattentive symptoms like disorganization or difficulty sustaining mental effort create stress, which manifests as worry, which then dominates the clinical conversation. Without digging into the origins of the stress, the obvious label of anxiety wins out. Understanding that anxiety and ADHD are separate, though often linked, allows for more accurate diagnoses and more comprehensive care. But when the wrong label persists for years, the psychological damage accumulates in ways that go far deeper than worry alone.